G'day, Stu from UAVfutures here, and today, well, get your can opener because we are opening a big can of worms. Yes, we're talking about the heavy quads versus light quads. We've got some very interesting little results to show you guys. Well, we're going to be checking out this 5-inch and all up. I want you to think, how much does your 5-inch racer weigh? I know some of these things on there, they're quite heavy, getting up around 500 grams. This one, it's under 200 grams ready to rock and roll. So it is absolutely ridiculous. You know, that's almost as light as some 3 inches out there. So there's not too many 5 inches out there that are under 200 grams. But what we're going to do, this is the part 1. We're going to stick it on the bench, look at the text and the specs. And then in the part 2 video, that's where we take it out to the field and we actually get some really conflicting results between Trevor, Cal, and myself. We all have very different experiences. And remember, these are just our opinions, but it's going to be very interesting. So if you're interested in a super light bind and fly racer, definitely stay tuned because it does handle like nothing you've ever seen before. Now, massive shout out to my Patreon supporters because like you can see, I've got 2 of these on the bench. So this is the one I've been ripping around. But we've got this one fresh here out of the box. So this one's going to be going out to my Patreon supporters. And if you want to win this or you want to be interested to go in the draw and you want to support UAVfutures, definitely, I'll put a link down below. But basically those people, I couldn't do the channel without you. You can also join up to Discord, have a heap of fun. So big shout out to my Patreon supporters and anybody who wants to sign up. So thank you very much because somebody's going to be winning that. But let's stick this on the bench, look at the text and the specs and find out why the FlyEgg 200gt from LDARC, stupid name, but anyways, link down below. Find out, you know, what is it like with the under 200 gram racer. So let's do it. Stick it on the bench and have some fun in 3, 2, 1. Alrighty, here it is on the bench, and first things first, you're going to notice that this is really a very, very small, almost micro-sized quad in the middle with some big 5-inch props on the outside. So that means it's going to be super light. That's what everybody wants to know. Let's stick it on the scales. Wait till these tear off. Take your guesses. It's coming in at 191 grams. So that is absolutely ridiculous when you think, you know, how much does your 5-inch racer weigh? And let me tell you, this does result in some very, very different flight characteristics that I can't wait to show you in the part 2 video. Now, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be going through the components, you know, the pros and the cons, the quality, the designs, all that sort of stuff, but as a bit of an overview, it's designed to be taken out of the box. If you're worried about weight limits, you want a different experience, it's got some very different motors on here. This might be a good quad for you, and I've got to say, it does hold up quite well in crashes as well. Now, through the review, I'm probably going to call it the 200GT, the FlyEgg, the Superlight, a whole bunch of different names, the King Kong, because it's got so many different stickers and labels on there, and that's from all the name changes. But look, the link's going to be down below if you want to find out exactly what it's called. Now, what we should do, let's jump right in. Let's have a look at the props first, and I'm going to take these prop nuts off here, and it's important because we're going to talk about those. Stuart, why are we going to talk about prop nuts? Well, you'd be surprised because there are some things to mention when you're talking about that as well. So let's take these off here. Right, so with the props off, this is kind of important because you can't run a very heavy prop on these because of these motors, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. They're 1806s, but the props we've got on this one, it doesn't recommend to run a very heavy prop whatsoever. So these are 5x4x3s, you know, no bullnose, nothing like that. A pretty standard, very gentle sort of prop. It's not going to pull too many amps, but that is very important when you have a look at the size of the motors that we've actually got. Now, you do get a couple of spares of these, which is good. I do find these bend quite easily though, so they're definitely not as rigid as some of the other props out there. Now, the motors themselves, well, they're 1806s and they're 2500 kV, so they're going to spin relatively quick, and it's going to be interesting to see the top speed because look, that combined with this is good, but I find these props, they do fan out, they become a little bit noisy on full throttle, and then instead of converting into some thrust with these motors, it converts a little bit into sound, so the thrust that's coming out of these things isn't quite as fast as I'd like it to be. And the other part to note about as well, when I mentioned these lock nuts, 2 of them go on really well, but actually I think it was the black ones go on really well, but the silver ones, they were so difficult to get onto the motors, and when I had to change a prop at one point, I almost had to damage the motor to get it off. So my advice would be, if you do get this, you know, thread these onto a different motor, because it is kind of hard to grab these smaller motors. You know, thread these onto a different motor shaft a little bit just to wear them in and break that little sort of seal in there a few times. It's going to make it a lot easier when you're changing out props in the future. Now, I guess what we should talk about, you can see it's made up of one unibody piece. It's a relatively stiff sort of frame. We've got our VTX in the middle. There's no ESCs on the arm or anything like that. So everything comes in, and you've got this tiny, I'll take this little pigtail out of here. You've got this tiny little stack in the middle, which to be honest is, I'm so excited because this is how I want our drones to go. Look at that. You've got a 5-inch and everything is in this tiny little stack right here. You know, so this is sort of right up there with where our technology is getting. Everything's shrinking down, which is resulting in some lighter craft that are under 200 grams. Now on the top, you can see we've got this big bit of aluminium protection, which is great because it is going to protect your camera. Now, speaking of the other internals, there's not too much more to go through. You've got this strange little PD in the PDB in the middle, which look, I'm going to flash a picture on the screen. There seems to be nothing really soldered to that. You've got your little VTX underneath, which is a changeable power level between a couple of 100 milliwatts and 25 milliwatts. You actually press this button right here and it's going to flash up with different colors. So make sure you've got the instructions, because it's not as easy. There's no nice LEDs that tell you. You've got to actually look at the colors, look at the chart, and find out what VTX channel you're actually on. Here's what I was talking about with the channel sort of color thing. So if you need this as a bit of a reference, you can zoom in, have a look, but there are some limitations on this VTX, and that was one of them. And the other part, you know, if you don't have the instructions, the other part as well, it doesn't have all the channels in the VTX, so there is some limitations in just how many channels you actually have. Now if we get towards more the goods in the middle, we've got our 4-in-1 Heli S 20 amp ESC rockin' D-shot, pretty standard. You know, it does make for an ultra clean little build coming in there. And then one of the stars of the show, it's all in this micro little size as well, 20 by 20. We've got this is our F4 flight controller Betaflight OSD, which is great, pretty standard stuff, but it works very, very well. And then we've also got our little run cam camera in the front, which is a CCD camera. These cameras are really, really good, and I like how they're protected so much as well. Little dipole antenna on the back with some LEDs, and then that's pretty much it for this very, very simple little craft. It's simple, it works, I like the protection, all that sort of stuff. On the bottom, you do have a little buzzer, which is handy, and also a nice little foam pad, which you don't often get with some budget parts. And I do want to point this out as well, I don't believe it, your actual little thing is zip tied down, so it's going to make it a little bit harder to rip off your battery lead, which I really, really like. Finally, a company has zip tied down. That doesn't happen all the time. Now, if we talk about the design of the thing, I'm actually a really big fan. I mean, look at it on the screen. It looks fantastic. It is very, very light, and I like everything they've done in here. So it's well protected. It just does its job, nice and simple. You know, it doesn't need to do anything extra fancy. It's just an ultralight that's well protected, relatively tough, and definitely for a 5-inch, it's under 200 grams. You can't complain. Now, the quality of the thing, I'm going to give it maybe like an 8 out of 10. I think it's very high quality. The only part I didn't like was these lock nuts, so it's going to lose a few little parts for that. But nice little things, like you've got this special tape. I don't know what you call this sort of nylon tape on the outside, but you've got some of that holding the ESC wires down instead of zip ties. It all looks very nice. It's a very clean build. The solder joints, I'd probably give them like an 8 out of 10. No loose wires whatsoever. And then even little things like a little zip tie for your antenna to go to, all that sort of stuff. It seems to be well thought out, like a little racer that you'd build yourself. Alrighty, so now let's talk about the pros and the cons. And for me, let's get the cons out of the way first. So it's not going to be able to carry a GoPro. So if you're after doing some freestyle stuff, you want to put a GoPro on here, I really feel like you're missing out. Yes, it can do it, but it's not where this quad's potential is at, because it's designed to be a really, really light little zippy quad. The other limitation for me was these motors and prop combos. So you're not going to have access to all the different props you want to put in on here. You are going to need to use some lighter props, which look is a bit of a shame and could be a deal breaker for some of the other people out there. And also these motors, you know, with the lock nuts, make sure you loosen these up first, because I almost had to damage a motor to get these off. So that part, you know, was a little bit concerning. And then finally, I guess this is a pretty small one, is if you want to put the receiver in there, it's a little plug, you can't direct solder. It was frustrating. You had to take out this little back standoff, which took about an extra 2 minutes. So I guess there we go. That's another little thing you might need to take care of. Now, in terms of the things I really did like, well, first, the price. So the price of this thing for a bind and fly ultralight racer is very, very great value. It works straight out of the box. It does fly very nice, even though it is very different. Another thing, of course, would be the weight. So if you're after a little race around a really, really tight little track, I love that. I think that's fantastic, and I've never seen such an ultralight bind and fly that just works so well straight out of the box. So if you want to try something new, this thing is definitely going to be up your alley. I love the camera protection. I love the components they've actually put in here, and I do think, you know, trying to keep that ultralight racer, having an 1806 motor is okay, I guess, if you've got the right circumstances and the right environment to fly it around you. And like I mentioned, good camera protection. Absolutely love this little part here. This is for your camera, so when you're racing, sometimes if you do a heavy landing, your camera can lose angle, but if you're one of those people who likes to set it at a certain angle, you can put this little screw in here, and that's going to lock it, you know, so it's going to lock it at 45, 30, 15 degrees or 0. I think that's a great little touch. It can't slide in and out, and if you want to get a bit of a custom angle, you can just take that out. You don't need to use that, because when I first looked at this, I was trying to move the camera, I'd loosen the screws, I had no idea what was going on, and then I realized we have this little sort of locking angle screw, and I think that little design is great. I'd love to see that on a lot more quads. So simple, I'll flash a picture on the screen, but works so well. But overall, look, I can't wait to show you the part 2, because I've never flown a quad like this. I mean, under 200 grams for a 5-inch is pretty ridiculous, pretty extreme, and I think it's going to be very interesting for a lot of people out there to see just how does this little flying egg 200 GT, whatever it is called, how does it go? So that's what we should do. That's what we're going to check out in the part 2. Alrighty, so there it is. There's my part 1 review of the 200 GT Fly Egg LDARC, whatever it is. It's linked down below anyway, looking at the text and the specs. And I've got to hand it to it. I really like the robust little size. The frame's great. great. Everything in here is really miniaturized, really shrunk down, and the motor's at 1806. You are limited in your props, but I can confirm it does fly like nothing else on the wall, and it's a really surreal experience that I can't wait to show for you guys. So I'd love to know, what do you think? Drop your comments down below. How's this going to go in part 2? And let me tell you, it's going to be a little bit controversial because Trevor, Cal, and myself, we all have very different things to say about it. So I'd love to know what you think about it and see if that's going to marry up and match up to what the rest of the crew thinks as well. Now, massive shout out again to my Patreon supporters, because look, I can't wait to give this out to one of you guys. And if you want to sign up, the link's down below. Thank you very much to anybody who does support the channel. Other than that, subscribe for more FPV related content. Drop your comments down below. How is this little bad boy going to go? You know, what is it like to have a racer under 200 grams? And as always, happy flying. Alrighty, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. Definitely subscribe if you're new to the channel and check out these videos. And I'm also going to leave a little link here to my Patreon page, because I've got some fantastic Patreon supporters and I like to give back to them as well. So if you want to join the UAVfutures family, there's things like bonus Velcro straps, little bundles of FPV goodies and things like that that also get sent out. Anyway, happy flying.